Officer Kelly reporting for duty, leaping leprechauns if it isn't Harry Hooligan, up to his old shenanigans. That wondrous hoodlum is robbing Southwicks, and on a Sunday at that. Come on then, lend a hand. We've got to catch the crook, recover the loot, and be careful to boot. Listen up, don't get KO'd by wild shopping carts, beach balls, and biplanes, and get moving! There's not a moment to lose! Okay, I won't do that again, but that's strong advice to heed from your official Crime Busters handbook, included with your new copy of Keystone Kapers for the Atari 2600. Keystone Kapers was developed and released by Activision in 1983 and ported to a few other systems at the time, including the Atari 5200 and ColecoVision. You play as the aforementioned Officer Keystone Kelly, a bumbling police officer trying to capture Harry Hooligan while he burglarizes a shopping mall. The game takes place on 3 screens of the mall, and the mall has 3 floors that you can move in between as well as a rooftop. The concept is simple, but fairly unique for the time and the hardware. You have to make your way through the mall and catch Harry Hooligan as quickly as possible before the time runs out, or else Harry escapes and you lose a life. You don't have any projectile weapons, you just have to run, jump, or duck your way through the stage. The good news is you can run slightly faster than Harry, but the bad news is everything in this mall is out to trip you up. Shopping carts, beach balls, antique radios, and remote control biplanes. You start off with 50 seconds to catch Harry, and if you run into most of the items, it docks 10 seconds off your timer. However, if you get hit with a remote control biplane, you lose a life. These biplanes are tricky too, because just when you think you've dodged them all, there's usually one more right before you get to the edge of the screen. There's a radar at the bottom of the screen similar to Defender or Chopper Command where you can see what floor you're on as well as Harry's location. You've got 2 ways to travel between floors, the elevator or the escalator. The escalator only goes up though, so you'll want to think carefully about how you use the elevator. Here's an example. If Harry is on the 3rd floor and you ride the elevator up to the 3rd floor, Harry sees you and will turn back around and go the other way. Harry doesn't ride the elevator, but he's a bad guy, so somehow he can still jump back down to the 2nd floor when he gets to the edge of the screen. Harry will go down a floor and you'll probably run out of time before he escapes since you can't go down the escalator yourself. Furthermore, don't go up to the roof at all unless Harry is already up there because there's no way to get back down and you'll get stuck. Catch up to the burglar and grab him to end the level, rack up some points, and move on to the next stage. For every 10,000 points, you get an extra life. Rack up 35,000 or more points and you can take a picture and send away to Activision to get your official Billy Club patch. Every stage looks the same, except as with most Atari games, the difficulty gradually increases. The difficulty switches on the console are not used, but you won't need them because after the first few stages, stuff gets crazy with tons of shopping carts and biplanes flying all over the place. The game throws everything at you and it keeps getting progressively faster. There's a rhythm and cadence to their patterns so you can figure it out. It just comes down to execution, but I'll confess, no matter how many times I play, I always forget to duck on that last biplane right at the edge of the screen. It gets me every time. This game is fun and ridiculously addictive though. It's simple, but you have to tip your cap to the graphics, especially with how your character actually looks like a cop, and the burglar actually has the striped prison jumpsuit. Everything is incredibly detailed for this being an Atari game. Keystone Kapers was primarily designed by Gary Kitchen, who also designed Pressure Cooker and the 2600 port of Donkey Kong, among other things. He said in a 2017 interview this game was inspired by a couple of different factors. First, he had been working on an escalator animation on the Atari 2600 that he hadn't really found a use for yet. He noted it was incredibly difficult to program this escalator animation and have it be functional given the limitations of the 2600, but he found a way to make it look really smooth and actually function like an escalator. He also mentioned that he knew he wanted to make a humorous game that would just be kind of silly and still enjoyable to play. Gary recalls being heavily influenced by the Keystone Cops silent films of the early 1900s. These films depicted the misadventures of the Keystone Cops, a troupe of bumbling police officers. The officers were mostly incompetent and the comedy stemmed from slapstick and nonsense. Gary thought the idea of playing a bumbling cop trying to catch a crook would be perfect and he started to work out the particulars. Originally though, he wanted to have Keystone Kelly chasing Harry Hooligan up the side of a shopping mall, with the action being more like a vertical climber. Harry would then throw items such as televisions or toys downward that Keystone Kelly would have to dodge. Gary Kitchen showed an early prototype of his vertical climbing Keystone Kapers game to fellow Activision programmer David Crane. Crane thought this might be a little too much like Crazy Climber, a vertical climbing arcade game of that era. David Crane suggested that Kitchen make it more of a horizontal runner game similar to one that Crane was working on at the time, the one you know as Pitfall, and just have Keystone Kelly run back and forth across multiple screens in the department store. After Crane made this suggestion, suddenly Gary Kitchen realized he had the perfect game to implement his animated escalator idea, and the rest is history. Keystone Kapers is easily one of the funnest games in the 2600 library and is one any Atari enthusiast should have in their collection. It's just as easy and addictive to pick up and play today as it was 3 decades ago, and since it typically goes for a going price well under $10, there's no reason not to grab it. And if you're still not convinced, this commercial should seal the deal.
You've read my name in all the papers and how I solved the Keystone Kapers. Keystone Kelly is my name. Catching crooks is my game.
Introducing a hilarious new video game, Keystone Kapers, for the Atari 2600.
Harry Hooligan was loose in a department store and me in pursuit from floor to floor. I ran and leaped and jumped and ducked with a bit of Irish stuff. I nabbed the bloke and saved the day. When Kelly's on the beat, I never fail.
Keystone Kapers, designed by Gary Kitchen for Activision.
Well, what did you think? Did you play Keystone Kapers growing up, or maybe discover it recently? Did you get 35,000 points and send off for your official Billy Club patch from Activision? What were some of your other favorite Atari 2600 games? As always, thank you so much for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.